Hey everybody! We are coming off the heels of the Donkey Kong Bananza Direct, and the game is looking great. It was a fantastic Direct, actually, and so it got me thinking of all the Nintendo Directs that were focused on one single game. Was Donkey Kong Bananza actually the best one? Or were there other past Directs focused on single games that outclassed it? So, I went back and rewatched every Direct that was focused on a single game, and today we'll be ranking them. Just for your purposes, not every video here was titled Direct. However, my source here is the official Nintendo Direct archive page on their website. Anything that was listed there and was focused on one singular game is on this tier list. There was other stuff that came close, like there was a Fire Emblem Direct, but it was focused on 3 different Fire Emblem games. And even then, Three Houses was barely touched upon in that Direct before we even knew what it was called. And of course, you have some other oddities like the Nintendo Museum Direct, but that's not a game. So yeah, anything that was listed there, even stuff like the Super Smash Bros. 50 Fact Extravaganza, it was listed on the Direct archive page. It is focused on just Super Smash Bros., so for our purposes, it counts. Everything you see on that list over there is what's being counted. So, let's get started, and we're going to do these in chronological order. The very first single game Direct was actually from a third-party partner. Platinum Games developed The Wonderful 101 as a Wii U exclusive. At least it was at the time, until the Switch version would eventually get kick-started, and then the other platforms would also receive the game. But at the time, it was like, look at our big new Platinum Games Wii U exclusive action title. And for being the first single game Direct, I have to say, it was bad. It was quite bad. It wasn't even really a Direct as we know them today. You see, it's divided up into segments, and it feels like each of these segments was supposed to be its own video, and then they just got stitched together into a Direct at the end, because at the end of every segment, the announcer comes back on with the Wonderful 101 logo and says, The Wonderful 101 is releasing September 15th. And then a couple more minutes go by. The Wonderful 101 is releasing September 15th. That's the kind of thing you'd put at the end of every Wonderful 101 video to remind people when it's coming out. You don't need it every couple minutes in the same presentation. So, that little awkwardness aside, did they show valuable information? Was it an engaging Direct? I would say largely they did all right. Oh, by the way, for the record, Hideki Kamiya was the host of this one, not Iwata, not any other Nintendo staff member, so it's weird to think that that's the person of all people who got to host the first Direct focused on a single piece of software, but beside the point. That information was presented. We learned stuff like the general idea of the story. They got into the gamepad mechanics of like how you draw unite forms in order to participate in combat or solve puzzles in the world. And so I wouldn't say anything was too superfluous. Like, for as bad as the presentation was in terms of tone and pacing, it at least had some decent information that would help you get to know the game. But the other place I have to dock points is at the very end. They end on a trailer, which makes sense, but it takes up like 5 minutes, and like, who needs a 5-minute trailer for a new IP of an action game? I don't. Like, I'm sorry, the game is cool. It's got its own style. I tried playing it on Switch and never got very far in it because it felt kind of awkward. But you know, I could see people being sold on the game through some of the information at this Wii U Direct. So, Wonderful 101. I'm going to tentatively place it in D tier. And I do have to make note that, like, you know, part of my ranking here, I can't let the quality of the game itself affect my ranking. This is ranking the Direct for the game. So there's going to be a couple games on this list where I'm like, I'm not playing that, but the presentation was solid. But yeah, I think there was just a bit too much meandering in the Wonderful 101 Direct. I'm not going to give it an outright F, but Yeah, it wasn't the best start to this trend of single game directs. And the second game, and the first one from Nintendo themselves, is Wii Fit U. Now, I begrudgingly have an affection for the Wii Fit series. I already told the story in the past video about how I got into Wii Fit, and you can check that out if you want. But suffice it to say, I was part of the intended audience for this direct. I'm like, okay, I got my Wii U. I liked Wii Fit. How is Wii Fit U gonna up the ante and make a new worthwhile entry in the series? And you know, the thing about it is they just focused the entire direct, for the most part, on the Fit Meter accessory. Like, that was supposed to be the big thing. You have this Fit Meter accessory, and they spend an agonizing amount of time going over the nitty-gritty details of, like, it can track elevation, but it tracks it separately from, like, your exercise intensity, and so you can overlay the two graphs and see the differences. Where, like, okay, the elevation changed a lot, but because he was riding an elevator, it didn't change the exercise intensity, like when he was climbing a mountain. It's kind of cute how they tell this story of sending a Nintendo employee up the Inari Shrine and then up the Tokyo Tower to make sure that the accessory is working as intended and can account for those types of differences. But it takes up so much time, and they barely show the actual game. The whole direct is like, look at this graph. Yeah, and then Reggie comes on to talk about pricing options, and this was a super weird period for pricing options with Nintendo because they're trying to sell the Wii U console, so they got to do stuff to the software. And so there was a Wii Fit Meter bundle that didn't have the balance board. There was one that did have the balance board, and then there was some other weird third option. And speaking of which, apparently this wasn't a Wii Fit U Direct, so it's kind of lying on the face of it. This is supposed to be a ranking of single game directs, and this was titled the Wii Fit U Direct, but they threw two other titles in at the end. So thanks for lying, Nintendo. They did an update for Wii Street U, which was something I totally forgot existed. It's a Google Maps software that you can, like, engage with on the Wii U and use the panorama of the gamepad. So they added balance board functionality, and that's the slight connection it has to Wii Fit. And then this is where they introduced Wii Sports Club, the Wii Sports title for Wii U with the very weird club pass option, and, like, you should just buy the... Don't do the 24-hour pass. I mean, not that you can anymore with the store shut down, but that was such a weird idea. I'm gonna play Wii Sports for a day and pay $2. That's... everyone thought that, right? So, this is getting the F tier. Alright, this one just failed outright. They needed to show more of the actual game for me to raise it any higher. That and the fact that it lied to me. Alright, next up we have Nintendo 3DS Guide for the Louvre Museum. Apologies for any pronunciation there. I don't think they pronounced it quite right in the presentation itself, but they're also not French. But this is a cute one, because it's just Iwata and Miyamoto walking around the Louvre during closing hours to show off how this 3DS guide works in preparation for the retail release of the 3DS guide. At this point, it had already been in use by the Louvre Museum for a year. Like, it had been over a year since it came out for the 3DS rentals that you could do at the museum. And unfortunately, I'm recording this at a time where it seems like they're discontinuing this feature from the museum, which is too bad. But it was nice to see them walk around, engage with the audio guide, the 3D models, and just talking about the artwork. I mean, it's a pretty special direct, and I think if you are a Nintendo fan who came in after this direct came out and you haven't already seen it, that it's a fun thing to go back to. Because, again, it's just a really cute anecdote. And I think it does its job well enough on trying to sell the title. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a B tier. It's nothing super wow. Like, not everyone's going to go out and buy Nintendo 3DS Guide to the Louvre Museum. But I like the presentation. Next, we have the first ever Super Smash Bros. Direct. There may have been other video presentations dedicated to it before this, but I'm going by the Direct archive, and this is the first standalone Smash Direct that is listed there. This was for Super Smash Bros. For 3DS / Wii U, technically, but it was mostly focused on the 3DS version because this was before it came out. And so for my icon here, to help me remember what was in it, I labeled it with Greninja. This is the first time that Greninja was revealed for the game, as well as the Smash Run mode that was exclusive to the 3DS version of the game. And those are very solid inclusions. I like playing as Greninja. I enjoy the Smash Run mode. It's definitely better than what we got on the Wii U version of the game, but that comes later. But when I went back and rewatched this one, I have to say Sakurai had not found his footing as a presenter yet. You know, these days I enjoy all the Sakurai presents that we've gotten for the individual fighters from the game's DLC. Like, he's definitely found his footing. I mean, he's got an entire YouTube channel's worth of videos now, so, you know, he definitely improved over the years. But this was the awkward beginnings for Sakurai running a Direct. So the pacing is not where it needed to be. And there's a lot of dilly-dallying on details that don't really matter in this portion of the presentation. So for that, I'm going to have to rate it a bit lower. But for having Smash Run and some other interesting stuff on the 3DS version, I'm at least going to give it a C. Yes, that does mean I was more engaged by the Louvre presentation. Tomodachi Life got a Direct when it came to North America. I'm pretty sure the game had been out in Japan for a while, but they were trying to introduce the game to a new Western audience now, and it's a quirky little adventure with your Miis. So this one, we did not see Iwata directly at the helm for this Direct. Instead, it was mostly run by the Mii characters from the game. And so that kind of takes the presentation down a bit when you're using the text-to-speech for your narration, but I get that you are trying to show off what the game is. And so it's a big series of skits, right? The Mii who comes on and presents is on the news channel and is telling all these stories about what's happening in the game, and they try and connect to Iwata, but then you see the Mii of Iwata doing something quirky in Tomodachi Life. Another thing that makes this presentation a little weird is that a lot of the skits had to do with the in-game romance options. And I know that's a central part of the game, is that Miis can pair up and even have kids and stuff. But since this was a presentation by the developers at Nintendo, you had key Nintendo figures, and their characters in the game were fawning over other fictional characters that they had worked with, like Aonuma with Princess Zelda. That feels a little awkward to go back to. And granted, Link was there to complete the love triangle and spur on some drama. And then the same thing, you see Princess Peach in there. And then, of course, God, they did Samus dirty. Samus Aran is so out of character in this Direct because the third person who shows up and tries to get romanced by the developers is Zero Suit Samus. And then he chooses Iwata out of nowhere. That's a whole thing. And then they break out into song using the in-game songwriting feature. And I do think that was a good idea, to use the in-game song feature to write a song for the trailer that would talk about the actual game itself. I like that bit. I just wish Samus wasn't like the headlining character for it, but maybe some people don't mind that so much. But yeah, Samus's characterization is certainly on the up and up these days with games like Metroid Dread. So yeah, there's some funny moments here, but there's also some awkward moments here. So I think that's gonna make it middle out a bit. Do I like it more than the Smash Direct with Greninja? I'd say a smidge, but I'm still gonna stick it in C. The Mario Kart 8 Direct. Following the Mario Kart World Direct, I did a full reaction to this one, and that video is available. So if you want my honest, in-the-moment reactions edited down a bit, you can find that. But to recap slightly, it was way more off the wall than the Mario Kart World Direct. I would not say it was more informative like a direct is supposed to be, but it had more entertainment value, but it was in a cringe sort of way. But it's like, at least they really leaned into the cringe humor a lot more, like full force. You had, God, there are so many segments that you're just like, what? That they would not do these days. And so, yeah, it was slow. It was relatively uninformative for people who knew anything about Mario Kart. And, yeah, cringe is the main word. But I do think that it at least gives it some value over something like the Wonderful 101. But was it? And, like, the cringe humor here is better than that in the Tomodachi Life. So I'm actually going to begrudgingly give this a B, but still below the museum. Hyrule Warriors got its own direct for the Wii U because this was a big partnership. So two people led this direct, and it went back and forth between the producer from Koei Tecmo and Aonuma himself, the supervisor from the Legend of Zelda series. And I actually liked what they did with this format. They talked about different aspects of the game, mostly on the Koei Tecmo side, but then every so often, in between segments, Aonuma would step in and be like, here's a random thing from the Legend of Zelda series, and they'd show it in the original game, like, here's a Kuko in Link to the Past, and then here's a Kuko in Hyrule Warriors. So you got a few splattered over examples of, like, hey, here's a thing that we took directly from the game and how we translated that into the Hyrule Warriors game. And so, you know, you get a feel for, like, yeah, they really went all out with the love letter aspect of this game. They showed how you get Zelda items and fight bosses Zelda style. They showed the adventure mode map. They showed several different characters and their movesets, including alternate weapons for those movesets. They revealed some villain characters were also going to be playable, ending on the note of Ganondorf himself. And the final image in the direct is Hyrule Warriors Ganondorf opening a treasure chest and holding up a heart piece. So, like, yeah, that sets the tone. There was maybe a little bit of, like, I mean, this is an element of the time, right? They talked about retailer exclusive costume DLC. They didn't specify which retailer was what. They were like, you're going to have to check on their websites, but, you know, if you want the Skyward Sword outfit, you're going to have to buy from a specific place. And yeah, Hyrule Warriors ended up laden with DLC on the Wii U. These days, you can just buy Definitive Edition and not worry about all that. But for the presentation itself, this is one of the better ones. Absolutely one of the better ones. Do I think it was good enough for A, though? Into that. Yeah, I'm going to put it there for now. Maybe I'll lower it a bit when I think about other games surrounding it. But I really do think Hyrule Warriors was when they finally started getting on track with these directs. So then we move into the 50 Fat Extravaganza, hosted by Xander Mobus, the announcer. And yeah, so this was right before the Wii U version of Super Smash Bros. So this direct, and this is classified as a direct on the archive, this was to establish the differences between the 3DS and the Wii U version so that you would see the value in picking up the Wii U version. We got a lot of information directly here. It was presented in the Smash announcer voice, so every so often there would be emphasis on certain words, and I do know that some people found that to be off-putting. Like, it's just doing random announcer bits for no reason, and stop being funny after whatever number of times that they did it, because it's a 50 Fat Extravaganza. It's gonna go on for a bit. But it was definitely more quick-paced than a lot of the directs that came before. I would even say that this was the start of them refining the approach to directs. And yeah, the fun information was presented here. We got the reveal of 8-player Smash, which was awkwardly done by revealing 5-player Smash, then 6-player Smash, and then 8-player Smash. I mean, I feel like you could have cut a little bit there, and like maybe do 1 fake out and then 8 players instead of 2 fake outs. Well, that's beside the point. We got Palutena's Guidance was shown off for the Wii U version. We unfortunately got shown Smash Tour, which even in the trailer, it's like, look at the game board and it doesn't look the most enticing. But there was the start of an idea there that would later get evolved in Ultimate Squad Smash, where you have different stocks be different fighters for each player. That was a fun idea. It was unfortunately exclusive to Smash Tour, and even then the player count wouldn't be even because of how the game works. You're competing for fighters. It's something that sounds better on paper than in practice. They talked about all the music selections in the game and how a CD with everything on it would probably be pricier than the game itself. They showed off new stages like Jungle Hijinks that really took advantage of the hardware. So, yeah, as far as information goes, this is one of the better directs. But I can see the announcer bit getting a little old for some people. That said, I'm going to begrudgingly give it an A. I might rethink these rankings by the end of the video, so stay tuned in case I change my mind. Next up, a very short direct, direct and to the point. We had an under 10-minute direct for Xenoblade Chronicles X. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a flagship Wii U title, and now you can play Definitive Edition on the Switch, of course. But at the time, this was the big, massive adventure. This direct was led by Bill Trinen. I forgot to mention him during the Tomodachi Life direct, but Bill Trinen was a big figure in a lot of these early directs. Yeah, you had Bill doing this very serious narration about like the stakes of the story and how vast this world is. And something I found interesting during this direct is that because Xenoblade would be a new IP to a lot of people, not everyone picked up the game on Wii, but they probably heard the good critical reception and word of mouth from that game. So in order to try and expand the audience a bit, they're trying to get people in using phrases like, it's as grand an adventure as a Legend of Zelda or Metroid game. You could tell they were talking to a Western audience if one of the things they thought to mention was Metroid. So yeah, they're really trying to give it the same seal of approval that they give their own first-party franchises. You get to see the world, you get to see that there's these mechs that you fly around. Yeah, it was a little lacking for information in terms of, like, combat, for example. Like, these days they would definitely go deeper into that, like the future Xenoblade Directs, which we'll get to. But this ended up being more of, like, an extended trailer than anything. And so I can't rate this one quite as highly, but it's not a wonderful one-on-one situation. I give it a C. And you can tell that I'm ranking the direct and not the game, because this game is fantastic, should rank much higher as a game, but as a direct, it was a solid C. Next up, the direct for Splatoon, and this was an important direct, because this was a brand new IP from Nintendo, and one that would eventually go on to be a massive success, despite being stuck on the Wii U. But this is where they got to fully explain everything about how the game works. My one issue with this presentation is how slow it took everything. I was like, okay, let's go to the headgear shop. The headgear shop is called Cooler Heads. This is Annie, and that's Mo, and you can buy headgear here. Now let's go to the shirt shop and go through that whole same rigmarole. Like, I get that they're trying to invest people in the world, and that's a big part of Splatoon these days. Now that people have jumped in and engaged with it, people do want to know the characters, the lore, the backstory, because there's a bunch of that there. But when you're presenting a new IP for the first time, I think you could have afforded to be a little more direct. Just get to the point. Be like, you can buy clothing. Clothing has abilities. Let's show a couple examples of how the abilities work. Like, here's run speed up, and here is bomb defense, and blah, blah, blah. It was really weird going back to this one and seeing that, like, there were only 3 main weapon types, the shooter, charger, and roller. And that stuff that would eventually become its own weapon class was being counted as one of those 3 weapon classes. Like, the blaster was categorized as a shooter, which I guess is technically an argument you could make, but now we have the whole blaster class. Same with the ink brush being in the roller class. I mean, I know I was sold on the game, certainly. Like, this is a game that I wanted to get as soon as possible when I heard about it coming out. And this was despite not being into any huge multiplayer shooter games prior. But going back to the presentation, it was a slog, an absolute slog. But it was information I wanted to see. So, there we go. Inklings belong in the sea. No, they don't. They dissolve. Alright, it's a little hard to see this icon, but that's supposed to be Corrin and Bayonetta on the front of that Super Smash Bros. Final video presentation. Again, this was counted as a direct for Super Smash Bros. 4, Wii U, and 3DS. And this is where we got a closer look at Cloud, the reveal of Corrin, and the reveal of Bayonetta. And so Sakurai goes into some details about those 3 characters, shows the final round of Mii costumes, any accompanying stages, talks about how Bayonetta came from the poll that went out to everyone on the ballot. And so, yeah, as far as final reveals go, I know plenty of people were disappointed to see Corrin, Fire Emblem person, and the game hadn't even come out yet in Fate's case. This is another case of, like, trying to advertise the game like they did with Roy and Melee. But yeah, I don't think Corrin's all bad. I do think that Fire Emblem characters from Robin onward have been more engaging, which is weird because they haven't added a Leer to the game yet. But Robin, you have your magic. Corrin, you have your dragon transformation stuff, so it's not strictly about the sword. Byleth gets all the weapons. So they've at least been trying to go different on the Fire Emblem front, and Corrin was a part of that. It's just that no one really knew anything about Corrin to be able to connect with them. And people who were sick of seeing Fire Emblem reps in the game were just like, wasted slot, guys. And then Bayonetta comes out, and I don't know how many people were really expecting Bayonetta to be anywhere near the top of the ballot. I mean, she wasn't number 1 on the ballot outside of Europe. But still, I thought it was a cool addition. At that point, I hadn't played Bayonetta's games for myself. But I don't know, I'm pretty happy that she's there, and there is that partnership with Nintendo now, so it feels like a nice closing of the circle on that. So, at any rate, maybe not the reveals that people wanted for the end of Smash, but I still think it was decently engaging as a presentation. I don't think anything was too slow. I'm going to put this one up in B. In fact, maybe above Mario Kart because it's at least not a cringe thing like Mario Kart. Alright, next up is the first in the Animal Crossing series of directs. This was for the big Welcome Amiibo update to Animal Crossing New Leaf. And so this one, they have costume characters of KK and Harv, or Harv for long, talking about the campsite and all the stuff that this update is going to offer people. I get the vibe that they're going for with the costume characters, certainly, and I do think that the Amiibo update was pretty substantial. In fact, I do know that there were features in the update that you don't expressly need Amiibo in order to engage with. Like, I'm pretty sure there's other way to earn Meow coupons and other stuff. I don't know, it was an unexpected refresh to the game. Like, no one really saw it coming, and it breathed new life into a game that people already adored and would still say is probably the best Animal Crossing experience. So I think that one also gets a B, but maybe below Mario Kart because Mario Kart, I can latch on to the cringe humor, whereas Animal Crossing is just like, I get the point. And now the first Nintendo Switch game on the list. ARMS got a Direct. And believe me, I like ARMS. It would rank pretty highly as a game on this list, but as a Direct, Biff is a cool character. Makes for a decent narrator on the scene. But I think we spent too much time focusing on individual characters and their arms. Like, that is the majority of this Direct, is here's Springman. He can do this and that. And these are his 3 signature arms. It was neat that they recommended arm combinations as an example of how to play the character, but they did it for every single one of the launch roster characters. There was like 10 of them. And so on the one hand, we got new characters that we hadn't seen up to that point, like Kid Cobra. But on the other hand, characters we had seen before and the ones we hadn't seen before, they were all given like the same equal amount of time. Here's this and this and this, and then this and this and this, and that and that and that. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like the goal of the Direct should be to sell people on the game, not to tell people who are already interested in the game all the details and mechanics. Especially because ARMS was a new IP. So yeah. Not entirely sure how I felt about the presentation doing what it did. I think it could have spent a bit more talking about the modes, which are in there, but they get a little more rushed through as a result. And then the weird thing about this Direct, it's the ARMS Direct, but at the end of the ARMS Direct, if you go back to the video, they end it on a teaser for Splatoon 2's single player. So am I thinking... I think these C-tier Directs did a better job selling me on the game than ARMS did. I mean, I like ARMS, though. I was already sold on the game prior to the Direct, in my opinion. There's room to argue on this one, but I'm giving it D. Splatoon 2 Direct. Wow, it was, yeah, I think I'm going to have to rate the Splatoon 2 Direct a little lower than the Splatoon 1 Direct, because Splatoon 1, you have the excuse that this is a brand new IP, no one's played this game yet, blah, 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 blah. But the Splatoon Direct reiterates so much of what was in the Splatoon 1 Direct and does it at the same plotting pace as the original Direct. It felt like I was watching the same thing twice. And maybe for people who didn't get into the series on Wii U, this was information that they didn't have because they didn't pay attention to it. And now everyone's jumping on board the new Switch system, and so they want new fans to have a chance to get into the game. Sure, but if you're trying to sell me on it as a sequel, someone who played the first game and should play the second game, I don't think that the pacing did a good enough job of catering to that side. In this Direct, we did learn about Salmon Run. We got another look at the single player. We saw dualies. Dualies are a big thing. We also got teases for post-launch updates like the Splatbrella. But yeah, it just felt like the Splatoon 1 Direct a second time. And plus, this tried to steal... You know what? I am going to move ARMS up to C. I'm going to move ARMS up to C because Splatoon 2 just tried to steal ARMS spotlight at the end of the ARMS Direct and then went on to have a real nothing burger of a presentation. They even did the same thing with the shops. They're like, okay, let's go to the headgear shop. This is the name of the headgear shop. This is the new salesperson at the headgear shop. This is what the headgear looks like. This is what headgear can do. Like, all the same problems with the Splatoon 1 Direct are in the Splatoon 2 Direct and are made worse by the fact that it's the second time. Okay, now... a Direct that took me a bit by surprise, the Animal Crossing Mobile Direct. Or you could call this the Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Direct if you want to go by the game's official name. Reminder, they shut down service on the game but released a paid complete version of the game so you can still get the Pocket Camp experience. But this was our first exposure to the game, and I thought it was nice, breezy, and quick. I did play Pocket Camp for a little while when it came out as an Animal Crossing series veteran who happens to own a smartphone and was like, let's give it a chance. I never paid any real money into the Leaf tickets or anything. I try and avoid doing that with the mobile games. But, yeah. Despite being a mobile game, and some people out there are just gonna dismiss it because it's a mobile game, if I'm judging it as a presentation of that mobile game, I gotta say, they did their job. They presented what they needed to present. They presented it as briefly as humanly possible. They supplemented it with, like, gameplay examples. Like, this is one of the better standalone directs, in all honesty. It's like, okay, we need to show off that there's these different areas that you go to get different resources. We need to show off that you can build your friendship level with animals for the first time and that you can fulfill their requests just like in the older Animal Crossing games. And so they start this whole cycle of like, this person needs 6 pieces of wood. Where am I gonna get the wood? Oh, I'm gonna go here. Oh, wait, diversion. I'm gonna catch this bug. Oh, turns out this person wanted that bug and will give me 3 pieces of wood. Well, wasn't that convenient? They also show off new mechanics like throwing nets and honey for catching larger amounts of fish and bugs. They show the different shopping areas. They show customizing the campsite. They talk about what the Leaf tickets do. I mean, like I said, as far as a presentation goes, it's just informative, breezy. And the only issue that I can think of with this presentation is that some people just don't want to play Nintendo games on mobile. Like, that audience is just gonna ignore the presentation altogether, but for anyone who's the slightest bit interested, this Direct was pretty top-notch, actually. I'm giving it an A tier. Next up is the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Direct. Let me tell you how much I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2. A lot. It's the best one. Xenoblade 3 was a step down. Let me know if I should ever talk more about that. But, on to the actual Direct. So right at the start of the Direct, they give us a new trailer for the game, but they put a little twist on it. They reveal that Japanese voice options with English subtitles will be a day one patch option so that you can play the game with those voices if you want to. They're like, in honor of this fact, we're going to put this trailer in the Japanese voices with the English subtitles. So that was neat. I am now tempted to replay the game with the Japanese voices because I haven't actually done that before. And they do sound significantly different. But I think the English voice work is fine once you get a little ways into the game and people have gotten into their characters. Besides that point, they show different worlds that you're going to explore in the game. They give you a sense of the story. And this one, unlike the Xenoblade Chronicles X Direct, really gets more into how the combat is different in this game compared to the previous Xenoblade Chronicles games. They talk about equipping your 3 blades and having your 3 arts per blade. They talk about the combos that you're going to perform in the game. And those combos are what I think makes the combat the best one in the series. Some people are turned off by what you have to do to get like a full burst combo going, but that's honestly why I love it all the more. There's a big setup, but a big payoff. So we got our first glimpse of that there. We saw many characters, many locations. We heard the soundtrack in the background the whole time, and, you know, that's a wonderful thing right there. So, yeah, I don't know that it necessarily presented everything that I would have wanted it to present, but it was all right. So I guess I'm going to give it a B. Dragalia Lost was an important direct on account of this was a brand new original IP specifically for mobile, made in partnership with Cygames. So this direct was your chance to learn what all that would entail. Is this a world that you want to get invested in? So we get our story introduction, and I'll say it felt a bit vague when I was watching it over. Like they just casually throw out like, "Oh, this is the dragon Midgard Sormer." I'm like, why is your name that long? But they do show the general game flow and how this is an action game and how you control your character, what combat entails. They show different party members. And, you know, they also show the mobile mechanics as you would expect of, like, you can get this and that. Like, even though I just watched this, I am kind of struggling to remember much of what was in it. But I do know that along the same lines as the Animal Crossing Mobile Direct, it could have been worse in terms of pacing. So I say... Here's the thing. It's kind of missing the bit that grabs me. So I don't know that I want to put it above Tomodachi Life. But I will put it above Greninja there. Next, we have the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Direct that came out a month before the game. And so at this point, we had other Smash video presentations for specific fighter reveals. Like by this point, we knew about Simon Belmont from an August Direct. But this was the standalone Direct for Smash Ultimate that would really lay bare everything we need to know about the game. My one piece of criticism on this one is they went about explaining spirits in the most awkward way possible. And this was a direct result of saving the adventure mode for the final reveal. And spirits mean a lot more in terms of adventure mode than they do for their event battles. But I do think that they still could have had World of Light at the end, and that they just needed to reorganize the order of information, the syntax, if you will. Like, talk about the fact that event battles have been replaced by these spirit battles, and that these are, you know, recreations of other game characters using what's available in Smash Ultimate, and that's what spirits are. And then when you claim the spirit, you have them collectible on the spirit list, or you can use them to power up spirit fighters, which are a whole optional thing that you can do in multiplayer. I don't know. I just feel like there had to be a better way to explain it than starting with, well, we got rid of trophies. And side note, I do wish that the spirits at least had descriptions the way that trophies did, so that we could learn more about who they are. Well, where from the world of imagination do they come from? That was another thing that made it really awkward. They're trying to work in the Smash Brothers lore of like, oh, the characters are toys and they're in the world of imagination, and they're trying to get back to the real world. And like, Sakurai, what are you talking about? I know what he's talking about from the Smash 64 intro, but like, come on, man. I also know that they were trophies in Brawl, but that felt, I don't know, it felt different in Subspace Emissary. But like, yeah, just casually throwing in, oh, the adventure mode, and then everyone going, what? There's an adventure mode? And we got a voiced cutscene, and we get to fight all these spirits and bosses, and like, yeah, good note to end on. Also, the Lifelight main theme having actual lyrics to it was revealed at the time, but that was all just at the end. In between, we got stuff like how many stages there would be, how much music there would be. We got the final fighter reveals, and this was another point where maybe it felt a little disappointing to some. I mean, I do think that leaks played a role in people's expectations, but at the same time, you know, Ken and Incineroar were the final fighters that were revealed at the start of this presentation. And Ken, I thought, was interesting because it meant getting another third-party rep as an Echo fighter, and, you know, who'd have seen that coming? And then he's followed up by Incineroar, and people have thoughts over that being the last fighter that was revealed. And, you know, I don't think Incineroar is a bad inclusion at all, especially because they leaned into the pro wrestling angle, so that makes them stand apart and offers a new fighting style. But, you know, Pokemon is like a first-party thing. You have all these third-party partners this time around, so people were, I don't know, somehow expecting more. Maybe they could have changed the order that they revealed fighters in and saved a different one for this final presentation. I don't know. But I don't think that should really play into the Direct as a whole, because it was still a fun video showing the boxing ring. And then we did get a surprise with Piranha Plant, which was maybe another thing that wasn't the best explained in the moment. Is like, wait, it's a fighter, but it's a pre-purchase bonus. Are you going to be able to buy them after the fact? The answer is yes. But yeah, it's at least better than the 50 Fat Extravaganza. Yeah, I'm putting it at the top of A for now. Super Mario Maker 2 Direct. It tricks you. At first, you think this is going to be one of the worst directs of all time because they're explaining simple stuff like, you can put down pieces of ground, you can place question blocks, and you can pick what goes in the question block. And then everything changes. This becomes one of the most fast-paced directs of all time. More so than the 50 Fat Extravaganza. They just keep on layering piece after piece. They start going through all the parts you can add to the course and give a very brief description with a quick visual aid. And they just keep it flying at you like, oh, this is the bonsai bill. Oh, the red ones will home in on you. Next thing. Oh, this is the twister. It's a tornado thing. Next thing. Oh, here's the on and off switches. Here's what you can do with conveyor belts. Here's a spike block. Here's a car that you can drive in 3D World. I swear, everything is as short as it needs to be. The information is flying at you. There's so much to take in, and it's all stuff that people would want to know in the sequel, because they're focused on the new stuff that you didn't have in the first game. And then they also show off story mode, which was a wonderful surprise because you get an actual set of 100 professionally designed levels in the game. So even if you have the worst luck on Course World, you could at least get the game for that. So, for the time being, I don't know if I'll put more than one in S tier, but Mario Maker 2 is quickly jumping up the ranks there. I cannot say the same about Pokemon Sword and Shield. This is the only Pokemon Direct on the list because it's the only one that is listed as a single game Pokemon Direct in the archive. So this was focused on Generation 8. We learned about Dynamaxing. We saw some new Pokemon like Dreadnought. Just a look at the region in the wild area. And, you know, this was another case where it just felt a bit slow and like, who is this for? Like, at one point, they're like, some Pokemon can evolve. And you're like, we're 8 generations in and you're telling us Pokemon can evolve. I mean, they were showing Eldegoss, which is a new Pokemon, as an evolution of Gossifleur, which was also a new Pokemon. But yeah, like, it's just... it's not a great Direct. I'll put it in D because there was still some new stuff to be seen that was actually about the game. I can't justify putting it below Wii Fit U because the problem with Wii Fit U is it was barely about the game itself. Alright, next we get the double dose of Animal Crossing New Horizons Directs. First, we have one of my favorite Directs of all time, if I'm being honest. The 22-minute presentation on Animal Crossing New Horizons that revealed things like you can get a permit to terraform the island. This is how the island expands over time. These are the NPCs and what they do. It was honestly a lovely look at the game. And because my family members played it too, I think my sister was about 9 years old at the time this game came out. So at one point, all of us just sat down and watched it. And like, I watched it a second time, even though I had already watched it, just to see them watch it. And my mom is like, I'm not sitting down for 22 minutes and watching all 22 minutes of this, but guess what? Once I started it up, it was just like, yeah, I'm gonna keep watching this for 22 minutes. We learned about Nook Miles. I think we got amiibo functionality here as well, and so that became a whole phrase. We saw Island Life for the first time, and to be frank, it looked great. It maybe could have been a little faster paced, possibly, but this is an A-tier direct for me. I was trying to put it above Smash. There we go. Believe it or not, the next single game direct was another Animal Crossing New Horizons direct. A few months later, this was the direct for version 2.0 of the game, which gave us the Roost, it gave us Cap'n, all sorts of updates that people had been waiting for. We got cooking. And so it was a grand, lofty update, and it saw revitalization of the game. So I think it was a worthwhile direct, mostly because the second half was the Happy Home Paradise paid DLC. And I've done a playthrough of that, by the way. But Happy Home Paradise ended up being really fun, and I really like how it was integrated into the base game. Like, hey, if you're gonna do all this fancy stuff to the vacation homes in the archipelago, you can take those same techniques, like building a support pillar or building a counter or polishing the furniture to give it a different visual effect. And you can transfer that to your home island to use on your home or even your resident's home. So it really expands the customization options. That's New Horizons' greatest strength. What it loses out on in terms of personality and interacting with these NPC characters, it makes up for in like just being able to make things look the way you want, which was something I always wanted from the series, but maybe we lost a bit too much in that transition, and New Leaf holds up a bit better. Anyway, that's beside the point. This direct showed a lot of cool stuff, and yeah, I'm just gonna give it another A. Animal Crossing does a good job with directs, I will say that much. The Xenoblade Chronicles 3 direct takes on a bit of a different tone from the past Xenoblade directs. This one focuses much more on integrating character moments and cutscenes from the game into the direct itself. So we open on a trailer, we hear one of the vocal themes from the game, which is excellent. And then as the narrator gets to talking about details of the game, you know, each segment is introduced by something corresponding to that. Like, hey, we're going to talk about the giant open areas of the world. And so now we're going to show a cutscene of the characters in the desert looking for an oasis. I think the biggest pieces of information we got from this direct was stuff like the character classes, how you can change them out, even to characters who don't start with that class, the whole 7th party member deal where there's like a big selection of heroes and they also have their own unique classes. We learned about fusion arts, Ouroboros, chain attacks. So I think it was a solid direct, but having played Xenoblade 3 since then, I do think there was maybe some key information that was not there, such as like how the art cooldown works in the game. There are 2 different forms of cooldown in this game. It's a whole thing. I mean, the game itself will get into that, sure. But I think it would have been neat to mention here. So yeah, I mean, I don't want things spoiled outright, so that's where you gotta be careful with Xenoblade Directs, is that hopefully they don't show too much late game stuff or things that the game doesn't actually want you to know about yet, but it at least felt good to watch. It was probably better than the Xenoblade 2 Direct. I think I'm just gonna put it right above. The Splatoon 3 Direct fixes the problems with the other Splatoon Directs. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the best Splatoon Direct that they've ever had. They do still go over a bit of the basics at the beginning for anyone new jumping into the game, but they keep that part so much shorter. And they breeze past everything else that would have taken up entire minutes in the past 2 directs. And this one is really focused on the new stuff. I think they know they can afford to do that because this is a sequel on the same console as Splatoon 2, one that already has a strong install base, so they don't need to try and lure more people in and help them get to know the basics of the game. They can just be like, here's the new story mode, here's the new Salmon Run updates, here's Table Turf Battle out of nowhere. Here's the new Stringer weapon. Here's changes we made to the movement with Squid Surge and Squid Roll. Here's how some abilities can affect that. They really kept it moving at a much more brisk pace in this one, and the narrator had some fun with it. Like, all of a sudden, Big Run starts happening, and it's like, Big Run is coming! So all the way up to A. Next up is Super Mario Bros. Wonder Direct, and you can tell that they learned from the success of the Super Mario Maker 2 Direct, because this is another one that is on the shorter side, but it just keeps information coming at a breakneck speed. This Direct introduced us to the playable characters, to the badges, to the online multiplayer, the Flower Kingdom itself, different types of new enemies that we'd run into. And that's the type of quick pace that I'm talking about. Like, hey, it's a platforming game. We don't need to tell you all that much. So, like, here's a new bird enemy. It's gonna dive at you. Here's the new Hoppy Cat. It's gonna jump when you jump. Like, that's all we need to know. And they're showing stuff on screen to accompany this. Right, that's how you keep things moving. Oh, here's a badge that lets you fire out a vine as a grappling point. Here's a new power-up where you spew bubbles and it can go through walls and stuff, or you can jump on the bubbles. Like, this was another good Direct that just kept stuff coming the way it needed to. It's maybe not as exciting to me as Mario Maker 2, just from a personal standpoint. But yeah, it's an A-tier Direct, what can I say? Okay, the Mario Kart World Direct, which I also have a reaction to if you want to see that whole thing. But as I wrote in the title of that reaction, it's like, what's the wow factor of this game? You have to keep in mind that this one came after the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, and not like right after, like a good deal after the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. So there was time for anticipation and expectations to build around what this Mario Kart World Direct would show. And the large majority of it is just reiterating stuff from the Switch 2 Direct. And I suppose having a standalone video so that people can, you know, show each other without having to scroll through the Switch 2 Direct. Although, granted, you don't have to scroll very far when it's your launch title that you lead the Direct with. But, like, whatever. If this had just been, like, a separate upload of, like, here's the Mario Kart stuff from the Switch 2 Direct, you still could have had the pretty similar effect. There was, like, a small number of things that we learned about the game. And I have a different video going over my main takeaways from the Direct. Like, what little new information we got. Was able to siphon that out. So it wasn't completely worthless, but it just felt like a time waster after the Switch 2 Direct. I'm trying to imagine, if we didn't have the Switch 2 Direct, would this have been a good Direct? And I think, even then, not really. Like, you probably would have had to rework it, because the Switch 2 Direct did most of the heavy lifting of, like, oh my god, you can drive anywhere. So, yeah, as such. And it's not... You know, I'm going to hold that Mario Kart 8 had the more entertaining Direct. So there was at least that bit of value. But I am going to put it in D tier under Splatoon 2. Last but not least, definitely not least, was the acclaimed Donkey Kong Bananza Direct. This was the most recent of the bunch. And if you hadn't been following leaks, like I wasn't following leaks, actually. I heard that there was some spoiler character around, and I avoided all mention of it. So, good job, me. So, Pauline was a total surprise as a result. And so, yeah, it was charming. The soundtrack to this direct, this is the best scoring for a direct that they have ever done, because they work in so many of Pauline's songs. I am very excited to hear the full game soundtrack. And it's not just her songs. A lot of the big band stuff is also really appropriate for Bananza. But we learned what we needed to learn about this game, which was, hey, it's not just about punching stuff. It's an Odyssey-like game where you're searching for collectibles. You have transformations. You can also build stuff out of softer material. There are these challenge rooms. And yeah, I mean, it just looks like a really fun time. They didn't linger on anything too long. You could maybe argue that some of the information at the beginning was super basic, like you can punch down. But even then, they threw in new moves. Like, I don't think we knew about the chunk jump prior to this. Maybe it was in a treehouse or something, but I didn't watch the treehouses. And so, like, sure, it doesn't hurt if you're going to show this direct to someone who has not heard of this game before. It doesn't hurt to throw in the very basics of, like, punching, because, again, they just keep breezing past it. So, is this the best direct of all time? Does it beat the Super Mario Maker 2 direct? For that is a wonderful question. I'm going to put them in the same level. I am going to say that DK Bananza actually is an S tier direct, but I'm going to give the slight edge to Super Mario Maker 2 on the direct front. Just because I think we had more to learn about Super Mario Maker 2 because of all the different tools in the game, all the music that got added, the themes. And Mario Maker 2 Direct also threw in at the end. This is where the Nintendo Game Voucher program got introduced, and they tried to use it as like, you could technically get a discount on this game if you also buy another one, at least the digital version. And that promotion, I don't know. Well, I guess they're discontinuing that promotion, right? Because it doesn't work on Switch 2 games. We'll see if there's ever a Switch 2 voucher program or any sort of equivalent to that. But hey, at the time, it was actually neat to learn. And so even if you weren't buying Super Mario Maker 2, that was a piece of information you could take with you from the Direct. DK Bananza, on the other hand, I mean, it's there. It's cool. It's got a vibe, and I learned a lot about it. It was entertaining. So it's in the upper echelons of single game directs for sure. But this is where my ranking stands. I'm going to make this tier list publicly available and post it in the description if you want to make your own. So feel free to let me know where you agree, where you disagree. And please do so respectfully, of course. We don't need to attack each other or anything. But that was my look back at all the directs focused on single games. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw here, consider hitting the thumbs up or subscribing. And if you want to see more, then stick around. I got more coming at you in due time. But until then, bye.